first of all, the left hand in the beginning takes care of itself. You can memorize it right away. It's just going G, D, G, D, right? You can memorize that.
Yes.
But the more difficult hand in this piece, at least the first part, is the right hand. And it's a series of broken chords. Now, you pretty much know what keys you're in this piece, right? You know that you start in what key? What is the beginning of the piece all about, the first half? In the key of?
I guess it's D. I guess it's G.
It is indeed. I'm looking at the first half. It's G major, that's true. You could even see the bass is continuously reinforcing the G. That's the tonic. That's the first note of the G scale. We call that the tonic. So we know right away this G major. However, because there's so many broken chords, the best way to practice this, when you look at this score, is to block the chords. You see, the first one is B, D, G. I'm going to just play. I'm just blocking that because that's the way my hand's falling into that grouping of notes. And now look what I do with my wrist. You see I don't stiffen my wrist? It's very flexible like a sponge because you really want to, eventually when you unravel these chords, you're going to be really having a very supple wrist as you play through these chords. You're going to have to do that because the triplets are what? A floating rhythm. They are not, military types of notes. They're very floating. If you played the scale like a triplet, you'd hear the floating notes. Hear it? Or, right? You hear just they float. Triplets float really well, especially if they're legato. And legato means what? Connect the fingers.
Connected.
Yeah, and you can see it has a big legato line across the first big phrase and then another one. Yeah. So here's the way I would have you practice this. I would say make blocks out of every triplet. So what do you have? You have 3 notes, and that's your first group, right? B, D, G. And then the next group, the second beat, is another triplet figure, and it's the same chord. The next one, you have a little bit of a change. What happens is the outer notes go up a step. See that?
Yes.
They do. But what do you keep that you had before? You keep the D. So that's called a common tone. So this chord and this chord share what? Your D. Now I can also tell you harmonically what's happening, because we need to get the harmony, we need to learn the chords of every degree of the scale. Actually what's happening is you have tonic, this is a G chord. This is called a dominant 7. Okay, now how do I know it's a dominant 7? If you go up 5 notes in G major, you go to the 5th note is called the dominant note. And if you build a chord, a chord is a skip pattern. So I'm skipping and I'm skipping and then I'm adding another skip. That's called a dominant 7 chord. And dominant chords like to go back to the tonic, which indeed he does. So he does a G chord or the tonic, then he goes to the dominant with the 7th, and then he goes to another dominant, he just flips the notes around, you see? But the main thing is I want you to be grouping the notes like this, you see? See how I'm doing it? Yes. Now he does, he's higher now. It seems like he's doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing here, except now he's changing, coming down. Now here's where it sounds kind of weird because listen to this. That's dissonant. Something doesn't belong. Look what I'm doing. I'm actually blocking the 3 notes I see. See? Dissonant, dissonant. Now if you actually unravel those dissonant notes, they fall into pleasant sounds. Look. See? That's pleasant. That's pleasant. And this is pleasant. But that makes the piece more interesting than just doing, chords, this old. That's not very interesting. So he does something more interesting. But even with your lack of theory knowledge, you can actually block the notes. Can you show me the blocks like this?
Yes.
With a supple wrist? Spongy wrist is really what you
What did you say? You said the 5th note is dominant?
The 5th note of a scale is called the dominant note. Okay, I'm gonna send you my chord sheet, which you'll start to understand when I say that. Okay, so the first note of a scale is called the tonic. This is the tonic, see? Right? And then the second note is the what? Supertonic. These are just fancy names. It's a 2-chord. See, because I'm just skipping a note. In G major, I'm skipping from A to C to E. That forms what's called the 2-chord. Because there are how many chords in a scale? There are 8, right? You could say the first one and the 8th one are the same because they're repeated, right? See this? Right. I'm not so interested in you knowing the theory of this yet because we'll be learning that. But I'm more interested in you getting the blocks of every 3 notes. Make a block out of every 3 notes. And take your time. Don't try to play fast. See how I'm doing it? Now what's coming out as the melody is the top note. Hear the top note? Because it has a melody running through the chords. I think you knew that. You can hear it on top. The 5 is the melody. Now the 4 is on top. Right? So that's what I want you to do. Block every single group of 3 notes under your hands with the right fingering that's in the music. And what I would do here is I would do these 3, and then the very end you can actually block 4 notes because it's going. So you could block 4 notes, G, B, D, G, as one block. Right? That's the only time you can block 4 notes at the same time.
Okay. I'll work on that.
Yeah, so here's the point. I think the big point is the framing rhythm. This is something I want you to get into your playing. I want you to play it slow enough with a slow enough quarter note. Remember, the quarter's being divided into triplets in this piece. This piece is all about triply divided quarter notes. So I want you to think really slowly, like this. Triplet. Why am I saying that? Because when it unravels, it's going to be triplet. Now you notice that the B is held through. You know that it's a double stem note. Did you notice the double stem note on the B and then the next B and the C and the A? The double stem means what?
Oh, being said that it is held as a quarter note throughout the.
Yeah, and you know what? It can't always be, but we do the best we can. But that's right. So that's going to be an important thing. That's like an alto voice. Do you know that he has another voice? Literally, this is another voice. Do you see that? And actually, last night when I was reviewing this, you know, the first thing I actually did was to play the alto, the double stem note. Because it's another line. Do you know that? It's like a counter melody.
It almost looks like a melody line.
It's actually the melody below the melody. But you can't forget it because a good player isn't going to let you forget that he's got a double stem on that note holding it over. If you start holding notes over, that means you're going to perk up to those notes when you listen for them.
I never even noticed it was a...
Most people don't. Most people just go like this. But that's not what he wrote. He wants you to kind of linger with those double stem notes.
How do you play it? How should I play it?
Well, what I'm trying to get to improve the playing that I heard you do. And this is like just a little review. I'll be giving you new things. I'm not always going to do old things. But what I want you to do right now, just like I said,
just block the notes.
Yes, because by doing that, you're holding that B down anyway. You're holding it for the whole triplet, right? Because you're thinking triplets.
Next lesson, I'll just be blocking the notes.
Yes. That would be the first thing I would do. But I think it's really important that you have a framing beat. Don't play with a metronome. You don't want to sound like a metronome player. But you've got to set up a beat before you even start. And I'm telling you what I would prefer is one delete, triplet. I'm not counting 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just saying triplet. Because that's all they are, a bunch of triplets.
I know the word triplet.
Triplet gives you 3 syllables. Triplet.
I know.
You know, I think there's a lot of people doing all the counting and they get crazy because you really should be listening.
Right.
And guess what? You know, the thing about the harmonic rhythm of this, and this is something we'll have to build on your knowledge. You can't just throw something at someone and it's like pig Latin. When you get to that third and fourth beat, right? This is where he goes into the dominant harmony. And dominant chords like to be dominant, meaning bigger, and then they like to go into less, relax into tonic. So I would go to the other direction with you and say, how slow can you play this piece ultimately? After you do a lot of blocks, you got to do your blocks. After you do your right hand block, then I want you to do the alto voice. One, two, three, just like that. Just, it's all thumbs. Is it all thumbs? I want you to actually hear that line. Now, what do you think I'm doing with my wrist? Am I, keeping a stiff wrist and playing, a stiff thumb? No. You've got to learn to really, play fluidly with a fluid arm down into your wrist, into your fingers. That's one thing I'm trying to get at today. Now, the second part of this piece goes into another key because it throws a sharp onto C sharp. Instead of C, you have C sharp, right?
Yes.
He actually goes into the key of D as in David major. Goes into another key. And so you need to know that when you're practicing it, and again, we're going to have to do scales. You need to know from the scales you play what key you're in a particular piece, But what I'm saying is he does go into D major in the second half, and he stays in D major until where? Where does he go back to G major?
Well, he goes back to G major at the scale going back down
exactly
to the...
right. And that's an important thing to know that, the scale's falling down and back into the relaxing it back into G major. And the scale is diminuendo too, right? It is falling down with a diminuendo. Yeah, there's a diminuendo toward the last two beats. There is a diminuendo.
I don't have that written down here.
See, look, here it is. Well, you know that the diminuendo sign is what? Is this, right? Is this?
What?
Diminuendo sign in music is like a V going down. Just falling down, right? Blocking is going to be very important. Even in the next half, you're going to block two notes because you don't have three notes anymore in the treble, do you? You just have two notes like this, right? You don't see three notes. It falls down into two notes, so you can block every two. See that?